Hello everybody, welcome back. So today I am going to look at some of the reasons that you should or shouldn't read nonfiction. So I like reading nonfiction, some nonfiction. I don't like all nonfiction, but I do enjoy reading nonfiction. When you read nonfiction, one thing that you have to kind of understand is like the lens through which you see the world. When you read nonfiction, some of it you're going to agree with and some of it you're not going to agree with. And that is all based on kind of the lens through which you see the world. So we all have certain biases or certain ways of seeing the world, and we are more likely to accept information that supports our worldview than information that does not. Just kind of a simple example would be that if you are a religious person and you believe in God, then your worldview, you see things through that lens and you accept things that support the view that God is real and God exists. If you are an atheist, you do not believe in God, then you accept information that supports the belief that God is not real. We develop this kind of lens of the world through our experiences, through our lifetimes. It can be challenged, and for the most part we tend to stick with old habits, ways of learning and ways of belief that we have had since we were growing up. Why should you read nonfiction? So the first reason is to learn new things. There's so many things to know in the world, and reading nonfiction kind of helps you learn about those things. You can learn about things like the universe. This is The Universe in a Nutshell by Stephen Hawking. He wrote about astrophysics and black holes and different things like that. Now, from after reading Stephen Hawking, I know a little bit more about how the universe works. The second reason is that you can learn what stories are based on. For instance, if you read things about the Tudor era, books about what history was like and what things were like at that time, you will now know kind of the basis for things like Game of Thrones, or A Song of Ice and Fire, as the book series is called. So learning about that area in history or reading those books about that history would explain that to you. The next reason, number 3, the reason to read nonfiction is that you learn about people's lives. You know, there's all sorts of memoirs and biographies, autobiographies and stuff out there. But you get to learn about what people's lives were like. This is The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls, and her life was quite interesting. This was a really interesting book to learn about someone's life. And that kind of opens up the idea like what people are like. The next reason might be because of your profession. In my profession, I read a lot with regard to therapy and treating addiction and all sorts of counseling, psychotherapy, that kind of stuff, because it's part of my profession. And because my profession is always changing, it's important for me to continue to be up on what's new and upcoming and what is the best way to treat people, or new innovative ways that are coming out now. Number 5 is to learn new skills or new hobbies. Say that you want to learn how to cook. There's a book for that. Say you want to learn how to draw manga. There's a book for that. Say you want to learn investing. There's a book for that. So it's a great way to learn new things. It's a great way to pick up new hobbies. Number 6 is that you can, when you're reading nonfiction, when you're reading fiction, you can pick out things that are wrong or inaccurate. I think for me this happened when I read The Five, which is the book about the victims of Jack the Ripper. And then after that, when I would read books set around that time period and they would talk about his victims, now I know, like, hey, that's not accurate. It is a commonly held belief, but it's not accurate. The next one, number 7, is to learn about what's going on in the world. There are books about, the big one right now, there's plenty of books out there about the Black Lives Matter movement. There's books about viruses in general and pandemics and that kind of stuff. So it can help you like learn about the world. One book isn't going to give you all of it. You can read several books about several different subjects and you can kind of have an idea about what's going on in the world. Number 8 would be that nonfiction can be a lot of fun if you find the right author. This book made science a lot of fun. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is What If by Randall Munroe, but it was a lot of fun to read. And the events in this I don't think any of them could ever actually happen. He worked for NASA. He was like a rocket scientist. And so he kind of broke down what if these absurd things could happen. And it was one of the funnest books that I've read. Number 9 would be that you can uncover mysteries or stories or things that you didn't know about. Hidden Figures talked about the women, the African American women who helped get us to the moon, which was something that I'd never heard about, which, you know, even though that I had known things about that time period, those stories were hidden. And now that they're coming to light, it's amazing to think about the people that were involved in those times or parts in history that we never knew about. Number 10, you can disagree with me on this one, but there is more information in a book than there is online. Obviously online we have lots of information at our fingertips. I guess my best example of this, like, I watched a TED Talk, and TED Talks are about 15 minutes long. And in that TED Talk they talked about the years and years of research that it took that he had wrapped up in 15 minutes. And then this was like 10 years of research. So he took 15 minutes to wrap up what had been done over the course of 10 years. If you look at maybe like the average Wikipedia page size, if you bought a book about the subject that you saw on that Wikipedia page, it would be much bigger. It would have a lot more information. Number 11 is that you're going to find different points of view. You will find that people interpret situations differently, that we all have a worldview, and as I said, like, we have a lens through which we see the world. It helps you understand and see other people's lenses that they use to see the world, and how their experiences and their life has influenced how they feel and how they see the world. Number 12, it is a way to challenge your beliefs. It is a way to challenge your worldview. It is a way to think about how the way that we see the world may not be completely accurate. It helps change that lens through which we see the world and challenge our own beliefs. I think one of the authors that's done this for me is Esther Perel, and her way of looking at relationships has completely changed the way that I see relationships and approach relationships in my work. Number 13, there's so much to know. There's so much information out there, and I know there's plenty of ways to get it, but there's so much to know, and there's so many books about things that you have no idea about. So, those are some of the reasons why I think you should read nonfiction. And now I'll kind of talk about some of the reasons that maybe you don't want to read nonfiction. So, first of all, like I mentioned how you could read a fiction book and you can say, oh, well, that was inaccurate. It might also ruin that book for you, because you can be like, well, this author didn't know anything about this subject clearly when he wrote this book. I think that's one of the reasons that I struggle with romance, is because I tend to pick out the problems in their relationship and they never seem to get resolved. But hey, love conquers all, but it doesn't really. Number 2, they can be a little boring. If you're going to read Stephen Hawking, you just have to know that you better have a dictionary, and kind of a dictionary, like a pretty comprehensive one, because you're going to come across words and phrases and things that you have no idea what they mean, and you're going to have to look them up. and it can be daunting, it can be boring. Not all nonfiction is fun and exciting to read. Number 3, it could remind you of school, of college, it could remind you of times that when you were forced to read things that you didn't want to read. Boy, you know, history class might not have been your favorite class, but you sure read a lot about history. Number 4 would be that there's a lot of conflicting points of view. Obviously, I said that has to do with how we develop our worldview and the things that we do to accept or reject those ideas. There's a lot of conflict in beliefs, and so sometimes you might be left wondering, like, I don't know what to believe in this situation. Not only that, there's constantly new research coming in that conflicts with older research, so it's kind of interesting to wonder, well, we thought this was true 20 years ago, and this is what we believe now. What are we going to believe in 20 years? I think you can always see that with when they talk about our dietary requirements for people. It's always changing. And number 5, I talked about how the book typically has more information than you might find on a Wikipedia page, but why bother when you can just look it up online and you can get the Cliff Notes version? Maybe that's the way you like to learn, and that's fine. Number 6, instead of learning how to draw from a book, you can just watch a YouTube video on it. YouTube videos, there's plenty of how to draw videos on YouTube that teach you how to draw things. So you don't have to go on the book, buy the book. You can do it online. So that could be the way that you like to learn. Number 7 kind of goes along with reading for your profession. Not all professions need continuing education. You know, that's not a requirement for all professions. Number 8 is that it can challenge your worldview. Maybe you're not at a place where you feel like you can accept new information and you're just going to reject it. So why bother reading something that you're just going to reject? Number 9, maybe you're a fan of science fiction, maybe you're a fan of fantasy, and you're not going to find a lot of those concepts in nonfiction. I mean, there is some like speculative things where they talk about like, this is what we expect to happen in the future. Number 10 is that real life doesn't always have happy endings. Some people's lives are very chaotic and they end very chaotic. And if you're reading nonfiction, especially some of the nonfiction in my field, the memoirs and stuff of people who have been abused and neglected and those kind of things, like their lives don't always end up well. Number 12 would be that history is messy. You know, think about the people who write the history books. History was written by the people who founded this country, and they left out a lot of things about the atrocities that took place in order for them to build the country. And I think now more of those alternate histories are coming out. But let's face it, history is messy. It's not as noble as we try to make it sound. Kind of one of the last things, and this is kind of the thing more like a preference as to some nonfiction I don't enjoy reading, is there's so much politics in it. And especially nowadays, a lot of the things that you read have a political overtone to them. Alright, so that's my video, the reasons why you should or maybe shouldn't read nonfiction. So thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.